We also now live on Tameside Radio, 103.6 FM. And for everyone who is watching or listening, please feel free to take part in tonight's question time. Because although I'm a newspaper man and do things the old-fashioned way, I can still get your emails. So you can still send your questions to Andy at facebook.com/, I think, Mayor of GM, which is where the live stream you can watch and put your questions in, of course. Hashtag Ask Andy, GM. And also on Tameside Radio, you can send your tweet or text, and Facebook at Tameside Radio, or text Tameside, and you need to text the word Tameside first, 82228. And if you've got all that, you're a better man than me. But thank you for listening. We have an enormous number of questions to get through this evening, Andy. And as you could say, as I said, being a newspaper man, I've got them all here. We'll be pushed for time to get through them all. Fortunately, there's a clock up there, so it might well be 15 minutes, but I will have to move you along for each question. My understanding is somebody with a mic will come amongst you all. If you can wait until the mic reaches you and then ask Andy your question. Give us your full name, and if you are a member of any groups or organisations, don't hesitate to let us know. There are questions on the NHS, a lot of questions about the NHS actually. Greenbelt, transport, homelessness, housing, and I mention all of those because there'll be a number of people in this room who'll be very anxious to get their questions to you. We are going to start though with a question about the police and funding and cuts and antisocial behaviour. And the first question is from Sharon Davis. Is she here with us in the room? And unfortunately, Sharon can't make it tonight, and she's not live by video either, but I'll have to read her question for her. So, Andy, central funding should pay for policing, but unfortunately, any additional funds must come from an increase in our council tax. Yep. How can all agencies address the increase in violent and serious crime, but also the increase in antisocial behaviour, punishment and prosecution? How can we work together to educate problem families and the offenders of criminal behaviour? And that question has come to us from Sharon Davis. There's a number of questions there.
It's a shame Sharon's not here, because it's a really good question. Police funding is difficult. You can all see that. Before Christmas, we got news that Greater Manchester Police are going to be cut in terms of their central grant for the 8th year in a row. We've got the Deputy Chief Constable Ian Pilling with us tonight. Ian nodding there. I mean, it isn't a great picture. I personally don't see how the government can keep doing that when the terror threat is as it is. The pressures on frontline policing are probably greater than they've ever been. I just can't see how it can make sense. And you know, the words of praise at the time of tragedy last year kind of ring a little hollow when it's followed by cuts again. So we're not in a great position. I don't want to kind of make this as though it's all someone else's fault, but that is the reality. So the challenge that both I and the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, Beverly Hughes, have had is what do we do? And we've been given the freedom to raise council tax to try and protect the front line. So it is difficult, but I am putting to the combined authority as we meet here on Friday that we do increase that police precept. £12 a year for a band D. So for most people here in the borough, that would work out, I think, at around £9, £10 a year. But I think it's the right thing to do. You know, in return, I'm saying to Ian and the Chief Constable, we want to see frontline full warranted police officers maintained and marginally increased, which we think we might be able to do. Numbers of PCSOs maintained. We want, obviously, all communities to have a visible police presence. And I also feel the 101 number needs to improve. So in return for the funding, you know, we aren't just saying here's the money. We are saying to Chief Constable Ian Hopkins and Ian Pilling and others, you know, these are the things that we want in return. Just very quickly on the broader point raised, I think the challenge actually, or the opportunity you could say, here is we can actually ask our public services to work differently to support families perhaps who've got, you could put it, got the biggest challenges. I'm not very keen on that phrase, troubled families. You know, I think life's hard, isn't it, at the moment? There are good reasons why people may not be always there to look after their kids if they're doing 2 or 3 jobs. You know, it's a challenging time. What I think we've got to do is get public services working differently to support those families so that we can take a longer term, more preventative approach to crime and antisocial behaviour. But, you know, the frontline issue is here and now, and we've taken that difficult decision. More than happy to take any further questions on it, given that it is obviously a significant increase that I'm asking people to bear.
Well, I'm going to open up the debate, Andy, to members of the public. Yes, do you have a mic? It's coming your way, sir.
Yeah, I was just wondering that you mentioned the possibility of precepts, I guess it's going to be for the police service, in addition to council tax. That could be done on, is that envisaged to be done on apportioned over the bands in the same way as the council tax itself is, or is it going to be like another poll tax? Just a lump sum on every council tax bill. There's various ways that it could be done. I don't know whether local authorities have got discretion to do it in different ways or not, but in theory there are various ways in which it could be done, some more socially equitable than others. And a poll tax would be, in the light of what's happened in the past historically, you know, during the Thatcher's time and so forth, that's not likely to go down particularly well, especially in these particularly hard times.
No, it wouldn't do, would it? And so just to confirm, it's not a poll tax, it's not a per person flat tax. So it's £12 per household for properties in Band D. But in your borough, I think I'm right in saying that around, well, certainly over half of the properties are in Band A, which is the lowest council tax band in terms of payment. And then, sorry?
In this borough?
51%, yeah.
I don't come from this area. But
Okay, and then in what we call Band B, which is, you know, the next one up, are then around about 20%. I think I'm looking at the chief executive of the council. I think I've broadly got that right. So they pay proportionately lower. So Band A will be about, I might be getting these figures wrong, but £9 annual charge. Band B about £10 a year. The truth of the matter is council tax hasn't been revalued since it was introduced, so it is a regressive charge. It isn't as fair as it should be. But this police precept is allocated on that basis. So, you know, we are asking people to pay more. I realise it's difficult, but I don't think you would thank me if I was saying to Ian and Ian, sorry, but no more money and you're going to have to take police off the streets. I just don't think we're in that position to be able to do that right now.
Anybody else got any questions about policing? I've got a few more on the sheet. Andy, that we've been received. Oh, is it? Yep. Yes.
Hello. I'm just wondering, having had experience of the 101 number for non-emergency contacts with the police, will you specifically let people know how that service is to be improved? And when it is improved, will you also let us know that you think it's been improved, so we can tell you whether it has been or not?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a good way of putting it. The Deputy Mayor and I have said to Greater Manchester Police, we believe it needs to be improved, both in terms of the response time, you know, how quickly people get to speak to somebody, and the prioritisation, because there is a concern that it doesn't prioritise as well as it might. So we will tell you, yeah, absolutely. You know, there's been a review going on, and I think it will conclude soon, and we'll be clear about it. Ian, I don't know if you wanted to add anything in relation to that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. My name's Ian Pilling, and I'm the Deputy Chief Constable. Just on the 101 issue, I do understand people's frustrations. I've used the service myself, and you know, there can be some long wait times at times of extreme demand. The average time to answer 101 is between 3 and 4 minutes. There are occasions when it's much longer than that because of exceptional demand, might be a major incident going on. But 3 or 4 minutes is what we're currently at the moment. If you go back 6 months, it was nearer to 7 or 8 minutes. So we have improved. We've got some additional staff now into the control room environment. On the 999s, the average time is less than 10 seconds. So in the event of a true emergency, we do answer that much more quickly. But I do understand people's frustrations. I think just briefly, it's also about the quality of the response that you get when you ring 999, sorry, and 101. It's not just about the time it's about somebody you speak to being able to deal with your problem and solve it for you, rather than just pushing it on to somebody else and then somebody else. So I think people want the phone to be answered quickly, but they also want a good service when they ring up and try to deal with those two things in parallel.
Thanks, Ian. But we'll say, watch out for more about it in due course.
Any further questions? Yes.
Could I make just an observation, please? As a member of the local neighbourhood watch group, I feel that's a very valid area for local people to be involved in, to build up that community spirit.
Yeah.
But sadly, that's why it's an observation. I don't feel that there's been the interest or whatever, police-wise. I know there's been changes, to be fair, within the police. They're under a lot of stress themselves, I appreciate that. But I just think that that is an area that we could be hopefully encouraging people to be involved in. Yeah. And the other thing is, personally, I know it's probably old-fashioned, but to see a policeman occasionally walking round, it is very reassuring. And sadly, because of all their pressures, we don't see them in my area of Mottram very much.
Well, I do understand what you're saying, and I'm sure Ian does as well. The commitment is to visible neighbourhood policing. That's what I want, what the Deputy Mayor wants. I think it's what we all want, but we've got to recognise they are under pressure. Last year I saw them at close quarters. I mean, they couldn't have given any more, really, in terms of what they were doing in the aftermath of the attack and everything. You know, really, they gave their all, and it is obviously difficult, and that's why we've taken this decision to make sure there is that bit of extra funding there for them. But on your first point, I think it's a good point, and it allows me to say something about the way we're going more generally as Greater Manchester. The old way of thinking that, you know, raising tax and then public budget, solving everything, and asking our public services to deal with everything, I think is probably an outdated idea, to be honest. I think we do have to maximise the contribution from all communities, and we have to have a different relationship between the public sector and the voluntary and community sector, and I've been saying that as Mayor. So what I want to see is longer term core funding for voluntary and community organisations like Neighbourhood Watch, so that you can add value to police. But it would be true in other policy areas as well, in the health service context, or in any area, to be honest. Because the idea that we give them a budget and they've got to solve everything, it just isn't, it never was going to work, but particularly not in these particular times. So it's about unlocking, isn't it? And we've put forward a new agreement between ourselves as a Greater Manchester Combined Authority and the voluntary sector, where we're saying, look, we will give you more funding, core funding for your costs, rather than just annual project funding, and through that hopefully help you get more volunteers and make a bigger contribution to what we're trying to achieve. So, you know, you make a really good observation, and I hope that has given you something of an answer.
That's encouraging. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I'll pick that up individually and just make sure we've got that support for that.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
Any further questions for Andy from members of the public? I have a few questions that have been sent in to us, Andy. One is about antisocial behaviour and how you help young people. We have had a few issues locally which have been reported even by the police, who are busy tweeting, asking, as parents, do you know where your children are? Because of various issues in Ashton and Stalybridge, particularly. So the question is, does the problem lie with young people and that there's not enough for them to do, really? Or does the problem lie with the parents or policing?
In some ways it's back to what I just said. It's everybody, I guess, isn't it? It's everybody's responsibility. Young people themselves to behave properly and respectfully, but actually all of us to give them constructive things to do and places to go, and of course parents as well. I do feel very strongly that we haven't done enough to support young people, and I'm not making excuses for them, because sometimes there isn't an excuse for throwing bricks at a bus or a Metrolink tram, or there's just no excuse for that as far as I'm concerned. But for some, can get drawn into that because there isn't, well, they don't have hope actually. They can't see where life is taking them. You know, I'm a big critic actually of the way education obsesses on the university route and leaves young people in their middle teenage years who want technical qualifications just almost adrift, really. So I feel part of the answer is doing more to support young people. I've already, as Mayor so far, introduced with TFGM, we've got half-price day saver bus tickets for young people. Earlier this month, we introduced half-price off-peak Metrolink travel for 16 to 18-year-olds. But I'm working towards a free bus pass for 16 to 18-year-olds. Why? I want to send a simple message to every young person across Greater Manchester that they can have hope at the end of school, that they can get to study or work, that there's something there for them, that they can get on in life. And I think at the moment, too many young people don't have that, and consequently may get drawn into that kind of behaviour that, you know, frustrates us all. So it is partly about being tough, and I'm the first to say let's be tough on antisocial behaviour, particularly where it's of the more violent kind and the more distressing kind. But let's also recognise that young people, in my view, this is one of my criticisms of Westminster, they've made young people the first target for cuts. You know, the EMA, Education Maintenance Allowance, was the first thing to go when austerity started. You know, you cannot build a strong society by robbing young people of hope and purpose for the future. You've got to invest in them. So that's why here, at least, through devolution, I want to say, well, no, they should be a priority for investment, and it's why we're going to start with that commitment to their travel costs.
Okay. Yes, the lady there.
Could you talk about transport, infrastructure and jobs in the area, please?
We will do, and we'll come to that very shortly, because it is on the list of themes and questions. Unless you want to go straight there, Andy.
Should we go into transport? The question's raised, so let me answer
next, if you like.
I think transport, I've said this, for me this year, has got to be one of my top priorities, if not the top, because it isn't working, I don't think. The trains aren't good enough. The roads are full, congested, people can't get around. Metrolink is probably the best bit of the system. It's the bit we control, but even that needs to be better, and I'm sure Transport for Greater Manchester would acknowledge that. The cycling provision isn't good enough. You know, it's not a great picture, is it? Some of it is an issue nationally. So we had this figure out today, I don't know if people saw it. The government is still planning to give London 2.5 times what the north of England gets, and it's not acceptable. You know, we were promised a northern powerhouse, and my question is, where is it? You know, you've got to back it up with investment in our rail services and in our transport more generally. But this system has got to start working better, in my view, and the buses is number one target, because I've got, thanks to Kieran and the other leaders in Greater Manchester, the Labour leaders, they made the ability to re-regulate our buses one of their key demands as part of the devolution negotiation. So a bill has now gone through Parliament, and I, as Mayor, have the power to re-regulate the buses. And I'm absolutely clear that we need a different bus system here. At the moment, they are free to do what they like. It was Margaret Thatcher's deregulation. They can go where they want, they can charge what they want, they don't have to have integrated ticketing systems. it's a disaster. You know, so they're kind of backing up down Oxford Road, and then you go to a more isolated estate and there's nothing. You know, it's a system run in the private interest rather than the public interest, and it's got to change. Look at London, it's £1.50 per bus journey, and if you go on another bus within the hour, you don't pay anything. Here, you can pay twice or even 3 times that, or even more, for a single bus journey. So transport has to change, in my view, and it's got to start changing soon.
Does that answer your question? We've got quite a lot of questions on transport. If we can move on to those. I mean, the other question around with regards to policing, sorry to take you back, was when are you going to pay police officers more?
Well, obviously we've got to balance that with how many, you know, I realise, as I said, police officers are giving their all at the moment, but at the same time, we've got to, as well as being fair to them in terms of pay, we've got to balance the numbers on with the numbers we can put on the street. So, you know, I know it's tough times for everybody, and I would like to, but obviously we've got to make sure that we can afford to do it without cutting the number of police officers. So it's difficult times. Sorry? Set nationally. Set nationally, that's true, yeah.
OK. Right, well, let's stay with transport then, as that question. What's your vision, Andy? One red or one blue? What colour will it be? The bus for Greater Manchester.
Orange and white again. We'll go back to the old days. I think it's an important point, though, because that illustrates the chaos, doesn't it? That they're all different colours. You know, no one knows what's a coach, a private hire, or a public bus anymore. You know, it's a messy system, and this single figure actually illustrates how bad it is. In 1985, when the buses were deregulated by Maggie, there were 350 million passenger journeys every year. Last year, that had dropped to 210 million. And that explains to you a bit why there are just so many more cars on the road. The bus system has lost people's confidence. Lots of people aren't using it. And it's not true in London. You know, London, where they do run a more affordable, more quality bus system, passenger figures have gone in the opposite direction. They've doubled while ours have halved in the same time period. Because London wasn't part of this deregulation experiment. They were allowed to keep the right to regulate their buses. So, you know, the buses are the backbone of the transport system. You've got 4 out of 5 public transport journeys are on the bus. If you've not got your buses working right, you've not got anything working right. So that's why I am starting there. And it's why by the end of this year, it will take a little while, but we will have made a decision in Greater Manchester on the future of the provision of bus services here. And I promise you, expect big changes.
OK. Anybody want to say anything else in the room? Yes, Lynn.
I just want to raise an additional...
I think we'll just wait for the mic to come to you. I don't know if it'll make much difference, but...
Hi, I'm Lynn Travis. Can you hear me? Yeah, right. I just want to raise one additional thing, because you've talked about young people and you talked about transport. We do have issues in Tameside around school buses and sufficient buses to get children to school. I know where my grandchildren go, there are 50 children not able to get the school bus, and the public buses are not always there at the right times, and in that case it's a dangerous journey along a major A57 route. But there are other schools that I'm aware of in Tameside, and it can't just be in Tameside that this is a problem. And that is important, that we get children safely to school, and it's been batted around between the schools and the council gets involved, but it's not our responsibility in that sense, and with TFGM, and it doesn't seem to be resolved after months and months and months.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that into the mix, really.
I'm aware of there's a campaign around one local school, isn't it? Is it Longdendale? Yeah. So I'm aware of that, and I think Johnny Reynolds MP has got a meeting tomorrow or Friday. So I'll obviously talk to him after that to see what can be done. The truth of the matter is, it's back to our friend, those cuts. You know, I think the school transport budget has been cut, and obviously people are feeling the effects of that. But obviously this is for some families, essential provision, isn't it? The issue is always, is there an alternative bus service that could be used? That's the test that TFGM now use. But I know that that's still difficult, and parents might have concerns sometimes of younger kids, particularly going on those services. So we'll definitely take a look at it. I wouldn't want to leave you the impression that it can all be sorted very easily. It remains an ongoing problem, and I'm sure TFGM, if they had the money, they would want to do more in.
Yeah. Yes, the lady over there.
We moved on from this, but you were just talking about young people and antisocial behaviour, and I thought just wanted to make a suggestion because I'm struggling with this myself. It'd be really good if, like, the Greater Manchester area had a careers advice service that connected young people, and because some young people might not have any advice of their parents or anything about careers.
Yeah.
And they might not know what jobs are out there, so they might sort of fall into antisocial behaviour because they don't know what to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and it goes back to that point I was making about technical education. A lot of young people, when they get to like 13, 14, who want to go down that route, they just don't know what's out there, what possibilities there are. And it's why, and my criticism of that is, and I know the Westminster system, having been there, it obsesses on the university route. It builds an education policy around it. You know, it monitors schools on their, effectively, on how many A to C's they're getting to put kids on that route. And it has traditionally neglected the other 50% of kids who want something different. So what's the answer? To pick up your point, your careers advice point, I've proposed what I call a UCAS-style system for apprenticeships in Greater Manchester. You know, a single system where, in the same way that kids apply for university, they could go on and they could find every apprenticeship in Greater Manchester, what courses those employers want young people to take, what grades they expect, and then they can apply in the same way. So, you know, a young lad, a young girl from Droylsden could go on and see everything that's available around and apply for it, and obviously with the bus pass when it comes in, then get to it as well. So that is the thinking. That's what I'm trying to build. You know, can't do it overnight. We've also got this new service called Bridge GM, which is about asking business people to act as mentors for young people, get offers of work experience, not necessarily a job, but places where they can go and get work experience or internships or work shadowing. Because we've got to open up opportunities to all young people, and not just those with connected parents. That's what I believe passionately in. And so we can't do it tomorrow. I wish we could, but we are putting down plans to build this. And to be honest, in keeping with the way we're trying to build everything that we're doing, we're going to put young people in charge of building this system. So next month, we'll have the first meeting of the Youth Combined Authority. So we're setting up a group of 40 young people from the 10 boroughs to mirror the main Combined Authority. And rather than just like pat them on the head and give them like, you know, kind of let them have debates but then ignore what they say, we are really going to get them involved in building this system. So hopefully you see something of an answer in that.
Thank you.
Right, yes, sir.
Could I go back to the transport bit? There were plans about 30 or 40 years ago for many roads that have never been built. So if you plan anything now, what says they're going to be built? There's things like the Mottram bypass, which has been kicking around for about 40 years. They built the M67 with a ramp to build a bridge over the top of the Denton Island to carry on down to Manchester. That planned road was to go down through Gorton over the Mancunian Way and out through Salford. There's a plan at Bredbury to go off and join with the new bit of road they're building round Hazel Grove and to Manchester Airport. These plans have been kicking around for 30 years minimum. What's the point in bringing new ones out if you can't finish the old ones?
Yeah, good question. I think you know that in your borough more than anywhere, don't you? Because, particularly as you're getting out that way, you know, as people heading out to Sheffield or coming back the other way, it's a bottleneck, to say the least, isn't it? I think on the Mottram bypass, it's finally moving, as far as I'm concerned. I'm told that the preparations, the work is starting actually kind of now, really, or in the next couple of months. It's the preparatory work, but it's going to start proper, I think, looking at the TFGM here in 2020. Yeah, it's starting to happen anyway, and you know, it really will get going in the next couple of years. On the Tintwistle bypass, I think that's kind of moving forward, but I don't think it's kind of quite in the same time frame. I think it's still more 2020 to 2025. You know, maybe that's a bit frustrating. I think both roads, though, and you know, we need to look at. I think the first lady's question was asking me about infrastructure that we might build. You know, Andrew Gwynn MP is making an argument about Denton rail station. He and I have discussed its potential to be a parkway station, you know, where you could have a car park there and people could park up. And, you know, it's got this daft one train a week through it at the moment, hasn't it? The kind of ghost train. It's just to keep it open. Well, I think there's a potential there to open up that particular station. So, yeah, there's a whole. I recognise that transport infrastructure in this borough needs to improve. Obviously, Metrolink has improved it to a degree, and I was hearing actually patronage on this line is up almost 10% in the last 12 months. So, you know, people are using it, but I think, you know, I hear what you're saying. The need for more, and the Mottram bypass particularly. I will make sure I will hold Highways England to the timetable now that's been set out, because you've waited long enough for that.
There's a lot of hands going up now, Andy. So, I think the lady over there was probably first.
Just going back to transport with the young people, I actually run the Prime Youth Club over in the Concord Suite. Would you actually be able to looking at the bus fares for secondary young people, not only enable them to get to school, but to help parents as well? Because a lot of parents, what we actually experience, generally haven't got the ability to actually pay for bus fares, which obviously young people will just like try and jump on a bus or a tram. So that can actually address antisocial behaviour. And also, what plans have we actually got in place? A lot of young people don't necessarily have the confidence to have a computer or be able to use a computer. Going back to what the lady said about having a careers opportunity, that's great, but some young people need that guidance and support, which we do actually try and do. Yeah. You know, do we have any plans in place that for like local communities where we could like tap into some funding to actually support young people? Which, I mean, Droylsden itself is a prime example, because we are really, you know, struggling for support of the young people and the community in general as well. So
yeah, well, no, I really agree with everything that you're saying. The difficult bit is that education policy hasn't been devolved, so we're trying to do some of this without the power, to be honest with you. Government education policy is very much about academies and free schools, and they should all just control their own affairs, and they've kind of resisted our calls to devolve the budget over schools and skills, but we'll keep making that argument. Some of these policies are kind of trying to do something where we don't necessarily have the powers, but we're going to try and do it anyway. But yeah, within what we've got, we would obviously want to support. When I was saying support voluntary organisations, particularly those working with young people, absolutely, where we can, we definitely will. We found a budget to create the Youth Combined Authority. We want organisations like yours to join with that, to network with it, so that we can begin to involve some of the young people you work with in the debates at Greater Manchester level. So there is a lot happening. I wish it could be more, but I don't actually have the powers over that stuff at the moment. But we're going to have a big focus on what we're calling life readiness at 16. You know, what support do we need to give to all young people so that they can make their way in the world? And you mentioned young people who don't have access to a computer, and you're right to say that. We've got to start first with the young people with the biggest challenges. So what I'm doing, working with our 10 councils, is having a focus, number one, on young carers, because I think there's more we should do for them, because they face real challenges when they're caring for a mum or dad, brother, sister, when they're trying to do their own, they often sacrifice some of their own opportunities when they're doing that. And number 2, care leavers. I would love to get to a position where Greater Manchester can bring forward a guarantee for young people in care for when they leave care. With their parents, they don't have parents to fall back on, do they? And in this day and age, life is getting really tough. And I know I'm still relying on my parents now at times for things. If you've not got that, how on earth do you make your way in this world where it's become much harder to get a job, much harder to get on the housing ladder? So I think, I'd love us to be the first place in the country that says, we're going to give a guarantee to care leavers, a guarantee of a home and a job, so that they can put down those kind of foundations in that critical late teenage years, early 20s. I'm going to go and every so often I do a walk around of Manchester city centre because of the issues I'm taking forward on rough sleeping and homelessness. I'm going to do it again tomorrow morning. What terrifies me is how many of the people on the streets now are young people, and I hate to say it, young women in growing numbers. Many of them are care leavers, and it's just wrong, isn't it? It's just wrong that they get to that age and then they just drop through the net and there they are on the street.
The main conclusion for you was actually sort of like 11 years, but when you get to 16, it's too late then.
Yeah. Young people, when you speak to them, as I do a lot, they ask repeatedly for one clear policy, and they call it a curriculum for life. That's what they keep voting for and keep calling for. And I think it reflects the fact that schools have become test and exam factories. That wider support that was spoken of, the career service, has kind of been, as they've been more and more kind of drilled in, they must get the results, that stuff, that wider support has been pushed out. And I think we've got to find a way in Greater Manchester to put it back in. So we are looking at building a Greater Manchester curriculum for life. That wider financial support, health advice, mental health support that young people aren't getting, but I believe they need. And we will work with organisations like yours to see if we can build that.
Okay, Andy, there's a lot of hands that went up, and I'm going to come across this way. There's a gentleman just a couple of seats back behind that lady who's been waiting a while, I know.
I'm from Moorside, Somali community. Our community has been since 1990, and still up to now we don't have a community centre or youth place we can gather. That's one question. And second question is why Manchester City Council private hire is 2 colours only for the cars, silver and white. What can you do to unify the colours of Greater Manchester private hires?
Yeah, that's another issue that's coming up a lot. We've been doing a congestion consultation, and a lot of people have said, is it time to look at taxi regulation across Greater Manchester and make it more standard across the 10 districts? Now, it's not for me to dictate to them. The councils would have to agree. It's they currently control it. But I think there is an argument for us to look at this, because actually it's not just our 10 councils. If you look on our streets, you've got taxis from other councils. Rossendale keeps getting mentioned to me. Wolverhampton, there are places where it's cheaper to register to be a taxi driver. People do it then and they come and work here. And I think the time has come actually to see if we could take a different look at that. And I think, like with the buses, if the taxis were more standardised, it kind of creates a better image of the place, I think, and it also gives the public more confidence in what are the reputable, regulated bits of the transport system. And on your first point, I don't know the background there, but I'd be happy to talk to you, see if there's something we could do to help.
Okay, I want to come over to this, this lady here, because first.
I was just going to ask, someone raised about the Mottram bypass, and you said it would sort out a lot of problems. I'm from Staley Bridge, and the traffic going that way and coming down is horrendous. The reality is, people can't help feeling that service, that bypass, it's not a full bypass. All you're doing is moving the problem further up. You still have a problem with it, because it's almost like we're going to give you that, then we can say we sorted the infrastructure, but the reality is you haven't. All you've done is just moved it a mile up the road. You should have done a full bypass. What's the point of half doing something?
Well, I don't know the details of the design, I'll be honest with you. And I think it's Highways England are the main body that's in charge of this. And they are not devolved, so they don't have to listen to me or Chief Executive of the Council. They will take our view probably, but they don't have to do it. I'll have a look at it and see if there's anything that can be done at this stage. It's obviously quite late in the process. The truth of the matter is, building new roads rarely solves transport problems because they quickly get filled, and actually it doesn't kind of reduce the number of cars on the road, which is in the end what you want to do. It's better public transport, I think, that is a better solution in the long run.
I think what you're saying sounds absolutely valid, but my concern is, in our area, our local MP is proposing to extend the Metrolink, but we already have train hubs, we already have the bus stations. Why put another option just going in the same place? Who, where we live, would want to get on a tram and go the route that's being discussed, where it'll take you longer to get somewhere than it would on the bus or the train? It just doesn't make sense. And one of the things that I think, Andy, is obviously you are heavy into this, is that you get involved and ask the people, not the local MPs and not the councillors. Ask the local people what they really want and need, because they're there working in it every day and sat in the congestion, dealing with the air pollution, all the things that, the air pollution you said you would try and reduce. This isn't going to reduce it. Some of the suggestions being put forward, it just seems complete waste of money, and what's the point?
Well, as I say, I'll take a look at it, and the point of nights like this is to give you that opportunity to influence what we're doing. And I'm not, in the way that I'm working, kind of going down a path where we just do things in closed rooms and then that's it. This is something I've inherited. It was obviously agreed before I came in, so I've not really been able to influence it, to be honest. I will take a look at it and see if we can pick up some of the points that you're raising. But I think in the end, the answer here is better, more integrated public transport. These individual modes are not good enough themselves, the buses, the trains, the trams, everything else, but nor can they integrate into a single system, because they're all, you've got the privatised rail system, we've got Quango running the roads, Highways England, we've got private bus companies. As I say, it's only the Metrolink that's under our control. So what I'm about to do is set up a Mayor's Transport Board. I'm going to get all of these bodies in the same room 3 or 4 times a year to have a debate about what they're doing in Greater Manchester, hold them more to account. The story with the M60 is scandalous, to be honest, the way that's gone on and on and on, and all of the congestion that's caused. They're not accountable enough to you, and we've got to make them more accountable in terms of the decisions that they're coming up with and the schemes that they're proposing. I mean, you mentioned Stalybridge. I might just kind of chuck in on this point, if I might, Nigel. I think I'm right in saying, I know the acting leader, John Taylor's here tonight. I've asked all councils in Greater Manchester to nominate a town as part of what we're calling the Town Centre Challenge, where we look at whether we can deliver more housing growth within the towns, i.e. build more of the homes linked to the transport infrastructure, rather than necessarily building roads and then building on greenfield. And I think I'm right in saying, John, that the proposal of Stalybridge will go to the Tameside Cabinet as the recommendation, because I feel that is part of the answer to all of these issues, to build more affordable homes in the town centres, breathe new life into the towns that way, by bringing people to live there, younger people possibly, and that's something that we're on with as well. So that, we're trying to link planning and housing to transport to make it more coherent.
I think that's fantastic, because at the moment, someone switched it off on purpose.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic, because obviously you're aware that Tameside Council have proposed 650 executive houses on Greenbelt that is nowhere near the local transport hub, which makes a mockery, really, of some of your manifesto about getting the air cleaner. And that's brilliant, and I absolutely applaud the fact that you're actually thinking about things and integrating with Tameside Council. But there's just one question. Obviously, there's a big brownfield site there, which would obviously tick the box. But how are you going to ensure that, first of all, one, there's going to be affordable housing built, i.e., not the £250,000 housing that they're saying? How can young people get on the ladder? But most importantly is, what money is available to help with those sites? Because Tameside Council, despite having £217 million in reserves, have said there is no money. Every town council meeting, we get told there is no money. So I think it's fantastic you're involved. You clearly are a very good figurehead. But how are you going to persuade them to invest some money to help make this happen?
Well, it's obviously a shared responsibility, housing. You know, councils have their responsibility. I've got to produce this plan at the Greater Manchester level for where the housing growth is going to go. But also I have some influence as well over housing policy. We've got an investment fund that we can control. And as mayor, this isn't linked to me. Obviously, this is just the fact that you've got a mayor. The reason why we're doing this town centre challenge is I've got new powers now that didn't exist before a mayor was created to intervene and make brownfield sites viable in a way that they may not have been, because I can use compulsory purchase powers, you know, to kind of clear sites up and open them up to brownfield development in a way that we couldn't do before there was a mayor. So what I'm doing, and I'm very clear about this, I think we've been too developer-led when it comes to planning and housing across Greater Manchester. We've almost kind of, and it kind of reflects a bit though, the fact that they just didn't have the powers, and the councils have, you know, not really been able to call the shots. It goes back many years. But I think now we've got more power, we need to get away from this approach where the private developers are dictating where they want to go, where they want to build, and you know, it's over the green sites which are cheaper. And you know, I'm not saying there won't still be controversial decisions, there will be, and I'm not going to comment on any individual site tonight. But what I want to do is move back to an approach that's about building truly affordable homes in our town centres, putting new life into those places and shifting the burden of development as much as we can from the green fields to the town centres. Because, as I keep saying, the vision that was in the first spatial framework for me was a vision for Greater Manchester of decaying town centres surrounded by urban sprawl, ever more cars on the road, worse and worse air quality, and it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. I couldn't sign up to it. So we're coming back with a new approach. And just very quickly to add to it, it's not just a spatial framework. Paul Dennett, the City Mayor of Salford, who leads on these issues for Greater Manchester on housing and planning, he is bringing forward a new housing policy where we are going to look at help with our housing providers, our not-for-profit housing providers, build more homes for social rent. So of the numbers we need to build the new homes, I want more of them to be homes for social rent. And we look at different ways of funding that. You know, we were given, sorry, just very quickly, because I know this is, but it's a big theme really. We were given this £300 million fund by the government, and the way they constructed it was it kind of had to go, it was built to almost go to those big developers who want to do the buy-to-let in the city centre. And you'll have seen there's been a lot of controversy about that, and there's been a lot going up. But the point is, now that money's been let, when the loans get repaid, we can use that money to fund very different housing development. So we can now turn that money to build much more affordable homes in our town centres. So hopefully you'll see more logic now as to what's being done. And we're going to bring forward a new housing policy for Greater Manchester in the next couple of months to make this, to spell all this out.
All right, thank you.
Fantastic, and I'd like to personally invite you to go to Stalybridge without all the politicians, MPs, councillors, and have a real look and ask the local people what they would really...
Well, if Stalybridge is...
I don't want to stop you, but I mean, in some ways, there's been a whole...
Just very quickly.
I just need
No, it is a yes. It is a yes. If Tameside confirms Stalybridge as the town centre challenge, I will go to Stalybridge and we will open it up to whoever wants to come and contribute to the discussion about the regeneration of Stalybridge. So yes is the answer.
I think you just have to come back. Well, you just have to come back to Tameside and do another question time, because there isn't enough time. It's great to see so many hands going. I'll go straight. Thank you for releasing the mic eventually, and we go to the gentleman directly behind you.
Thank you. Good evening, Andy. I have an interest in transport, and my question was on Transpennine links. But if you'd bear with me for a minute, I can give you a brief update on the M62 bypass, M67 bypass. I have the brief at the moment for strategic planning and transport on Tameside Council, and I did meet with Highways Agency before Christmas. They assured us as a council that the money's there, the funding's there. They're already on site doing test boring, and that'll take 4 months at least. They're due to have some strategic consultation meetings around about half-term in February. So it is moving forward, and in response to the lady in front, it's not what we want as a total, but it's a start, and part of the design allows us to link in with the Tintwistle and Hollingworth bypass. But my question was on Transpennine links. I'm a big believer that we need not only strong rail links, but also an all-weather Transpennine road link. And even with the work that's being proposed, it doesn't give us that all-weather cover. We have 3 tunnels at Woodhead. 2 were opened in 1953 and closed in about 1965. As far as I know, they're in perfect nick. They've still got the overhead stanchions in for the electric cables. But Highways England and the Department of Transport keep saying no. And they even came up with the idea of building a 26-mile tunnel. The infrastructure is partly there. Some of it will need replacing, but we've got to start, and that would give us an all-weather tunnel and Transpennine route. But having Transpennine rail links should not be at the expense of local services, which are going to mean changes in the timetable from Mosley and Stalybridge stations, and swapping trains from Victoria to Piccadilly stations, putting hours, in some cases, on people's journey. We're supposed to be a local transport authority, and we need to fight for the residents of Greater Manchester with Northern Rail and Transpennine Rail. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Peter. I know it's been controversial, particularly Mosley, Greenfield, and I know I've met with them and Transport for Greater Manchester to raise their concerns, and we have resolved some of those concerns, but we're still in those final discussions. Stalybridge, I think, will get better services when the new timetable comes in. I'm looking again for confirmation. I think it will. There's new trains coming on Transpennine as well. So there is improvements in prospect. You're right, though, about the road links, because, I mean, it is your local pressures on the, I'd absolutely accept that. But this is also the kind of gateway, isn't it? Manchester towards Sheffield, isn't it? And so, it's important to Greater Manchester as well as your community. And this bypass isn't probably going to solve everything, is it? So we're going to have to look at those other options as well, Peter. And I know you've done a huge amount of work on that over the years. So, yeah, we've got to keep the pressure on the government. The idea that they can just cancel electrification on the Transpennine like that and never give us an answer, which is what they did in the summer last year, it's just outrageous. It really is outrageous. So we're going to be keeping the pressure up all year. And in the middle of this year, we hope to gather all the northern authorities together, leaders, mayors, to really get the voice of the north speaking much more loudly, because we're going to need to make this argument together for much. We cannot have a northern powerhouse unless we have massive investment in our transport system, and we're going to have to win this argument. And if it comes down to a competition between us and London, Crossrail 2 or rail investment here, well, we, the north, should win that argument, because we've been second-class citizens when it comes to transport for too long, and it's time we came to the front of the queue.
can I come across to this side of the room, because some people have been waiting quite a long time now.
Sure.
The young lady over there.
Hi. I seen your interview on ITV this morning just regarding that issue. In my opinion, the transport to London and travelling around London is much more efficient than it is in the north, and it potentially could take me over an hour just to get to Leeds.
Yep.
In your opinion, how long do you think it'll take realistically to actually catch up? Because I think we're so far behind that we've kind of fallen on the back foot.
I don't know. I mean, nothing happens quickly in the world of transport, unfortunately, as I'm realising in this job. I'm frustrated. I want change and I want it quickly. Buses, yeah, I can see within 2 to 3 years we will have a very different bus system within Greater Manchester. Even that can't be done overnight, but there's a prospect of change there. On the broader picture, it's not all in my hands, so I don't know is the honest answer. London has a better system because they have more investment and more power. And to be honest with you, I'm not making a kind of political point of the government. Governments of all colours, including the one I was in, didn't invest enough in northern transport. I learned this during 16 years in Westminster. The country is completely London-centric. You know, most MPs live down there, nearly all of the Lords live there, all of the civil service, they all live within the M25, all of the decisions get made with inside the M25 in mind, and that's what we're up against. And as I was saying, I was saying to Peter, we're trying to make the argument now to get some fairness into this debate. We will get some improvements. There are improvements to buses coming, to trains as well. You know, Metrolink is a pretty good service, but we're going to expand capacity on Metrolink as well. We're going to buy more trams soon. Chris Boardman is our cycling and walking commissioner. We have funding to start improving the cycle facilities to make them safe, separate cycle tracks. That, I hope, could be within as I say, 2 to 3, 4 year time period. So some of this you will see in the short term, but to get what London has got, we're looking at decades, I'm afraid, until we can say that. The simple reason we can't have an oyster system at the moment, a proper one like London, is because we can't tell the bus operators what to charge. We can't tell them what ticket machines to use. They're doing their own thing, so we can't make it an integrated, contactless, fully functioning system. In London, they've got both £1.50 bus journeys, but a daily cap. So if you go on the tube and then on the bus, it keeps a kind of running total of what you're spending, and it puts a limit on what you can spend in a given day. I think it's about 12 or 13 quid, I think it is. So you can't spend more than that. Here, you could get on a couple of buses and spend 7 or 8 quid, and then when you get on Metrolink, it's like you've not been on anything before, and you're a new customer. And they have just got not just a better system, a much cheaper system for the travelling public. And given the inequalities across the country, how can that be right that people here are having to pay 3 times as much for bus fares as people in London?
Thanks, Andy. Are there many more questions about transport particularly? Because I do want to move on. We've only got 20 minutes left, and there are 2 big issues I want to bring up. One is homelessness and a question about that, and another one about just care in the NHS, really, especially now that you are a lifesaver, Andy. We'll talk a little bit about that. So just a couple more questions on transport. We'll keep them very brief, please, and to the point.
Hi there. Yeah, you've mentioned Chris Boardman's your new cycling walking strategy person. He's obviously released his go-to vision of what he wants. Now, I'm quite impressed that you've backed him on it. It's kind of quite a few £1 billion, which is quite brave of you to do that. What are you going to do to ensure that kind of East Manchester, Droylsden gets the kind of same cycling levels at Disby and Oxford Road, and that we get a proportion of the money as well, so we get safe cycling routes?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I'm building to is a £50 million a year fund to begin with. So I've got the money identified already. It was given to us in the budget. So to be fair to the government, I'm not all just here scoring points. They gave us some money. We've decided to put a big chunk of it aside for cycling. My challenge then goes to your local authorities, and you have a chief executive who's been actually lobbying me, like you, for more money for cycling, because you're a keen cyclist, aren't you, Stephen? So my challenge now is, the quicker that local authorities, working with cycling groups and again the voluntary sector, come to me and say, right, here's a plan, we're ready to go with this, the more likely it is that those will be the first places to see the investment. So, you know, Chris is on with it. He doesn't do anything by halves, Chris. You know, if he's doing something, he'll do it properly. And we backed him with the money, and he's getting going. So the quicker that local areas develop their proposals, the more likely they are to happen.
Okay, and I think there was one more question about transport, was it? From the gentleman behind?
It's sort of half and half. I think it's dovetailing as well.
Okay.
Special framework.
Andy?
I will.
So the question really is about demand on the transport network more than anything else, making sure that when we're planning for jobs, we don't just look at the city centre but distribute them as evenly as we can. We talk about centralising, but at the same time, if we repeat the centralising on London, making it centralising on Manchester, people here don't benefit. So actually getting the jobs to come here, as well as getting people connected with the jobs in Manchester and Sheffield, how much planning is going into that?
Yeah.
And related to that as well, working with businesses to develop digital infrastructure a lot better, with all the jobs that can be done these days that don't require the commute in the first place, that can be done remotely, actually encouraging the technology that's already out there, getting that used to make sure that people don't make the commute 5 days when they don't have to.
Yeah, well asked, Will. Good question. Will and I were opponents in the election, weren't we? Will was the Green Party candidate, but made some brilliant contributions into the mayoral debate, and we agree on a lot. And my answer to your first question is the town centre challenge. You know, I think we've had 20 years where there's been a lot of focus on the city centre, and I stood on the ticket, you'll remember, you know, you and I agreed about this. We now needed to kind of apply the same ambition to the surrounding towns, the proud towns of Greater Manchester. So the town centre challenge is about that. So if I can prove it works with, let's say, Stalybridge here, and basically, just so everyone understands what we're proposing is, we're basically saying that they're not going to be the retail destinations they once were, these towns, as you know, shopping has gone online. What I'm saying is, and this might be controversial to some people, make them more residential centres. You know, build more homes in the town centres. Actually, you might stimulate the economy as well by doing that, because you bring more people in who then, you know, might want bars, restaurants, coffee shops, whatever it is. You know, so get life into those town centres. If we can prove it works, I'm quite happy to go back to John and Stephen here in Tameside and say, right, let's have a round 2, a round 3. You know, if this idea works with our more interventionist planning powers that I was talking about, let's keep spreading it throughout the towns in Greater Manchester. On the second point, you're right, digital infrastructure. We're always going on about transport, but if we're going to be a real world-leading city region, we need the best digital infrastructure. Tameside actually has led the way in Greater Manchester on this. They secured money from the government to invest in full fibre, and there's been a project running here. And actually, again, this is back to Kieran, but Metrolink was built here with the kind of ducting underneath it so that it can carry some of the cabling. So we have taken some good decisions that put us in a good position. We're effectively now wanting to take the Tameside experience and put a bid into government for full fibre across all of Greater Manchester. So we're working on that at the moment.
Right. Thank you, Annie. I want to move the conversation along, because is Ryan McHugh here? There he is. We'll get to you now, sir.
Hi, Andy, you okay?
Hi, Ryan.
You touched on it slightly earlier about obviously a big voice for the city on the homeless issue, but my interest is what's your short and long-term plans to attack the issue?
Yeah, well, short term, it's ambitious, but it's ending rough sleeping by 2020. And what I mean by that is, in every place, having somewhere for people to go at night where they can have a roof over their head, but not just that, it can be a safe environment, a secure environment for them to be. Working with our partners in the councils, we've already begun opening new provision. So I created the Mayor's Homelessness Fund day one in the office. I make a contribution, 15% of my own salary goes into it every month. That helped open a new hostel in Cheetham Hill. with about 15 spaces in it. We opened one in Ardwick before Christmas. The City Council have opened one in Chorlton. We are slowly opening more provision. There isn't enough at the moment, and obviously you can see that because of the number of people on the streets. Figures will come out tomorrow from the government that show, sadly, the problem is getting much worse. You can see that, people know that. What I can say to you is, yes, the problem has got worse in Greater Manchester. Our response to it has got better, but it's not yet good enough. So our immediate thing is giving that immediate respite. But we've done another thing, which is we've introduced what we call housing first, which is a longer term solution. So working with 15 of our housing providers, around 200 properties are being made available to a housing first scheme. And this is firstly being targeted at the most entrenched rough sleepers, the ones who've been there the longest. And housing first is about giving them a home, but then letting them focus on themselves and on their health and on other issues they may have, to then begin to turn their life around. So that programme has began in earnest in January, and we've had 200 referrals of people already to the Housing First scheme. So I know people are saying, and rightly, why aren't you doing more, why aren't you doing it more quickly? We are beginning to put plans in place, and tomorrow we're going to announce a big expansion of Housing First, where we're going to open it up to 400 more people. So we are working flat out, I can assure you of that. But it's a massive challenge, and the frustration for me is obviously, you could argue that we could be doing more, could be doing things better, and it's a fair criticism. But actually, the flow of people onto the street is caused by, largely, I would say, government benefits policy more than anything else. They recently took housing benefit off those care leavers I was talking about, 18 to 21-year-olds, and that explains why there are so many young people out there. So the problem is getting worse, but I don't hold me to account on it. I've said I'll give everything I can to making a difference on this, and I'm, as I say, I'm trying my best.
Desperate to ask a question of you. Just a bit over there. I'll come to you next.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Christopher.
We've met before. I think it was your first one, and your mayoral election programme. You made some promises ending rough sleeping by 2020. I don't think you're going to keep that promise, Andy. I think you're going to fail miserably on that promise. And that's, I'm sorry to say, just off the short little things we've seen off you, but I am going to give you a big pat on the back for managing to get Housing First off the ground and started. That's a big step in the right direction. I'd just like to there's three things I'd like to ask you. The first one, bring you back to the greenfields and getting more affordable funds to build more affordable housing for the rent market. Why aren't you using Section 106? That's rightly available to you now to use, and to every other council. That ensures that every private developer makes a commitment to that council to open up as much as 24% of that development to the social affordable renting market. Yet for the last 6 years, Manchester Council and Greater Manchester Councils have refused to enforce that section of law which you can implement. Richard Lee's failed over and over again, and he's still failing to this day, as we know. Also, I'd like to ask about the young persons combined authority. Again, I think this is a cracking idea. It's something you really need to concentrate on the city centre. There is a massive amount of young people ending up homeless in our city centre. Right now, every day, there's more and more coming. And it's because the support services aren't there. But they are there. It's just they don't work properly, or they don't work at all. I'd like to know why, if you're so strong about supporting young people in the outlying areas, why you're failing them miserably in the city centre. I want to know why you're allowing...
Just give Andy a chance to answer those first, because there are quite a number of other people. We're really running out of time now, which is very
I do have one more bit to that as well.
I appreciate what you say, Christopher, and the way you've put it. I know I've made a massive commitment in what I've said. I know that. And I might not succeed. That is a possibility. But it's right to try. Well, it's right to give it a go, isn't it? I mean, I am giving it a go. I can only tell you that I'm out there. I'll be out there at 6:30 tomorrow morning. I will, and I will see them. And you're right about that, because I've seen them and I've spoken to them.
You've had them all renewed for the city centre.
I haven't. I haven't. No. I haven't.
I can take you on a walk right now. I can take anyone in this room, and I can produce 100 witnesses that will back my statement up. You have criminalised the homeless people.
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Most of them are young people. Most of them.
No, Christopher, let me answer your question. I haven't. Well, you know, I do not. I don't control every policy.
Every day, it's empty. At night time, it's absolutely riddled with homeless people. Yeah, that's because you're criminalising homeless people, and then you're giving them a DOR slip, which stands for Do Not Return. How's this helping homeless people? How's this supporting the homeless people? You're not, Andy. Come on, get real, give us the truth. What are you going to do in the city centre? How are you going to support Danvik Street? How are you going to support Whitechurch? These are the two biggest funds, two biggest organisations that support.
I just have supported them.
How? What are you doing for them? Can you make it?
I mean, I'm happy to be able to account for what I'm doing and what I'm not doing, but I am not. I am not.
Yes, you are, by allowing homeless people to be
I nor do I decide Section 106. I don't decide Section 106, Christopher, so I don't mind. I'll answer for what I'm responsible for, but I can't answer for what I'm not responsible for. I don't control everything, every single thing in Greater Manchester. I'm working through what are challenging issues. I've been in post coming up for 9 months. As I say, I can show some progress, but it's not good enough. I want to do more, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who is going to help us deal with the problem.
I'm going to let this lady ask her question, because she's been waiting most of the night, actually. So we'll move on. Thank you, Andy, though, and I'm sure the discussion will continue afterwards.
It will, I'm sure.
You've quoted the air pollution as your manifesto, yet when it comes to getting answers for air pollution that we're having in Droylsden, we're not seeming to get to end of matter.
In what particularly?
There's an illegal landfill sign.
Right.
Yeah, it's coming into us houses, and we're all getting poorly. We're getting coughs, as eyes are hurting and everything. And you're charging us more. We're having to pay council taxes and everything. Yet our health is at risk, but nothing's been done about it.
Okay. I mean, again, that might be one for me to sort of work with the council on. I'm happy to take a look at that particular issue. What you're saying, it sounds serious. It's having those health. Yeah. Yeah.
Live on the same road as the lady.
Yeah.
And so we're a permanent sufferer along with it. There's a farm, Andy. You've walked around there when we canvassed actually, and you visited. I know you walked, and not some of yours in Droylsden. It's what we use in Old Farm, Garside, or whatever it is, farm. Someone's purchased it, and for some period now they've been dumping and dumping and dumping. They blocked the road down, which belongs to the Medlock Valley Walk, country walk, and tried to walk a dog, and people. There's threats going on. And people are on about using guns and all sorts of things. There's a lot of criminality now. We had the police there, to be fair. Police came, they arrested a driver because he was wanted on firearms charges. They blocked the railway bridge. They cut it off. They've blocked it again. They cut it off. It's an illegal. The smell now. We live right on top of it. That's what it says on it. Yeah. Well. Just one thing on it comes under the environmental agency. We are working with it, and the frustration that we've got is, and I'm not blaming the environmental agency, is that they are saying there's legal action going to be taken, but the frustration is it's getting worse and worse, and no matter what we're doing, they were tipping at the weekend, weren't they? And I've got pictures of that, there are pictures of that, and our officers have been great dealing with it. But we're frustrations with the environmental agency, and what you've got now is a farm that's polluted the River Medlock, where we put fish in it not so long ago, and even a scientist, we've had scientists there that polluted that, so that, and it's now the whole of Droylsden. You're looking tonight, it's a wet night.
Well, it's clearly a big issue, I can see that. So I'll give you a commitment. I'll have a meeting with yourself and residents, and the Environment Agency and the police. We'll get all the relevant players together, and I'll see if I can help move it forward for you. So thank you for raising it. The commitment tonight, I'll have a meeting to see if we can do something. I don't mind overrunning a little bit because we started a little bit late, didn't we?
I appreciate that, Lydia. I'm from Failsworth, I'm in the Midland. We belong to Tameside for our votes, but we belong to Oldham. Nice to see Chris. Nice to see Will. On behalf of Dacre and Zereby, I want to ask you, Andy, you seem like a man of your word. I believe that by 2020 you will have done as much as you possibly can to deal with the homelessness issue, which comes very much and very clearly under the banner of poverty. The girl's question was regards careers advice. That's a face-to-face subject. People don't have face-to-face support because shelters were removed. They were removed from across all of Greater Manchester. We need them and we need them now. Your will to go ahead with this and get on with it is great. I'll work with you, we'll all work with you. I know Chris will, and we'll be watching. Dacre would have been scrutinising, he would have been patting you on the shoulder and working with you, make no doubt about it. His head of his manifesto was for poverty and that to tackle homelessness. This is 2 years ago he was saying this. 2020 is not, it's too far away. What is needed in Manchester right now, and this is from face to face, not within the squats, not talking to people, coming out on the night. I'll come at 6:30 in the morning with you, but that's not the time to go. If you want to come again on what I've seen on Sunday evening, which is people immobilised, statuesque in the streets, falling. No, this is at 7:30 on a Sunday night, Andy. The majority of the homeless people that outreach volunteers speak to claim the same thing. They're all unique, they're not all young, many of them are quite elderly, many of them are from different communities. But what all of them state when you speak to them face to face, and all the volunteers and all the charities in Manchester that are filling the gaps say the same thing. They're filthy dirty and it's making them ill. Please, I beg you, reopen the public toilets in Manchester City as a matter of urgency to address what is a personal hygiene, human rights dignity for everybody passing through, but specifically to use at least a wash basin to wash one's hands before you greet your mother on Christmas Day. I had a lad crying in my house who's only on the streets because he was 6 months unemployed and they locked his house to him. He wanted to go home. I sat and wept with him. It's not about money, it's not about food. Shelter isn't just to keep you warm, it's to provide personal hygiene dignity for a woman that might be bleeding, for a man that might have diarrhoea. People's hands, faces, bodies are filthy. They need somewhere to use the toilets because the truth is, Andy, it's now a public health and safety risk. The excrement and the urine that's throughout the city centre, in the potholes and in Rochdale and in other town centres is sitting there for business owners to open. They're speaking of it personally. They're going to business and meeting faeces on the door and in the back alleys. You need to come out at night. None of us, not an animal, would excrete or urinate where they sleep. Moving them on is true, Chris. That's what they do. I know they do. The signs are there.
It's an impassioned plea.
I beg you, if you can't reopen the ones that already exist, and they're there, Andy, they're on wash basins, at least create some new ones. I beg you, let them out. Because that's all our risk. And the way they speak the buses won't work while there are potholes. Doesn't matter what bus you put in. Birmingham's got clean green buses. We've got potholes on every road and street. The police have been told by the councillors to phone the police regarding the private developers that you speak so clearly about and honestly about that are wrecking what's left of the streets. There is no culpability and councillors tell citizens to phone the police. Please open the toilets or create some other. It is an emergency.
I can see, honestly, I can see. But I think
I'm there daily, as is everybody else passing through.
The passion, you know, I can see it and I share it. We need to do this rather than doing it in opposition with each other.
Not in opposition.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. We need to get together to get this sorted, don't we? And we are beginning, all I would say is, we are beginning, I feel we've made a lot of progress in the last 9 months where the bodies at GM level are working better now with the 10 councils to have one strategy to deal, that we all agree to deal with this. Hopefully we're going to agree that, sign that off at the Homelessness Action Network next month. One strategy, we're all singing to the same tune. But the reality is, and I'm going to try to answer your question, We haven't got the facilities in all communities that we need to give people that basic decency and the dignity that you're talking about. I'm trying to answer your question. I can't. Well, I'm trying to answer your question. I don't control all the toilets. I'm trying to do what I can as quickly as I can. That's all I really can say.
I'll volunteer to stand at the toilet to let them get a wash.
All right, thank you very much.
That's what's making them sick.
You're overrunning, Andy. Do you want to take any more questions?
Well, we started a little late, didn't we? I could see a couple of hands, but maybe run on for 5 minutes more. I realise some people have got questions that haven't got in, so try and...
Specifically about this topic, or are you moving on to other things?
Happy to carry on this if you want to.
I just wanted to say, Andy, I was on your manifest for health and social care, and one of your pledges was...
It's Lisa Evans.
Yeah.
My mum has dementia, and I also volunteer for Tide, which is a carers network of families with loved ones suffering from dementia together in dementia every day. On your manifesto, you made a pledge, Tameside, as long everywhere in the UK, there's a big crisis with social care, also with NHS. There's people on the needs not met. Tracy's mum here, she can't get care, and you promised that you was going to look at health and social care and make care a profession, you know, not for carers to be valued. When I say carers, I mean community carers. Also, the problem as well is when it's with the NHS, when you ring, is it 111, they automatically want to send an 80-year-old person into hospital. There is no, even though Tameside is integrated care, it's still not happening. I have to refuse ambulances because I don't want my mum to go to hospital, because I don't want my mum laying in a corridor, and there needs to be more support. Tameside, there's more people being at home being cared for with dementia than cancer and heart conditions together. There's families, and there's families here, we have no support. We need admiral nurses.
Yeah.
You know, I spoke to you a lot about this.
I agree with you. I remember it vividly because it was brilliant what you said.
I know it's changed, it's got worse.
Well, just let me try and answer it. I mean, I think you're right. We're in the 70th anniversary year of the NHS. Until we have an NHS that supports people with dementia, as well as it treats cancer, we won't have an NHS that's ready for the future. And that's, in my view, a reality.
Not just that, Andy, there is not one care home. You know, all the professionals, carers need respite, yeah? I have to take my mum to a home to meet her needs in Glimmin, Cheshire, an 80-year-old in the final stages of dementia.
And that's
There's
because
nothing, it's
social
disgusting.
care is a broken system, isn't it?
How would you mend it?
Let me try and answer.
Sorry.
You know, I can't, you know, again, it's one of those things. In 9 months, I can't solve, honestly, I'll be honest, I can't solve rough sleeping and homelessness as much as I'd like to. I can't solve all the transport problems we've got, and I definitely can't solve NHS and social care in that time. However, we are developing plans. Carers, informal carers, we launched a carers charter last week where we're asking the NHS to at least respect carers, informal carers, don't treat them, take them for granted. That was agreed last week. Tameside, I know but the hospital is doing better. It's been doing better. It's performing quite a way above national average at the moment. So it is improving. I think personally, and this is where I would want to talk to the council, I would like Tameside to be perhaps the next place that goes down the road that Salford have gone down, where the adult social care budget is commissioned possibly through the NHS, so that we begin to look at a completely integrated system. You know, that is obviously a local decision. It's for the council to decide whether they want to do that. You know, it's not about mandating anything. But I believe personally that if you combine the budget for social care, primary care, acute care, and have a single payment for the whole person's care, you then will get a much more coordinated package of care that starts in the home. And that's when you can make a big jump forward when it comes to integrating health and social care.
You still need support. You know, if if my mum had cancer, I'd have a Macmillan nurse.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
nothing,
I don't disagree, but also, the government have been underfunding the health service, I'm afraid. They've slashed social care in terms of the budgets they've given to councils. We're trying our best to make it work in that situation, so we can't create utopia here. What we're trying to do is make it work better given what we've got, and that is just the reality, I'm afraid.
Andy, are you happy to take one more question?
I am.
So I've got a young man down here, very keen.
Yeah, I'm Daniel Davis of the Tameside Children in Care Council, and you mentioned before about care leavers, and I've got a statistic that young people in care are 4 times more likely to need mental health help than their peers. And I personally been waiting 9 months for a counselling session, and I was wondering, as mayor, is there anything you can do?
Well, definitely. That, I'm sure no one in the room thinks that's good enough. It's not, is it? Particularly, mental health services have always been the kind of poor relation of the system. But even within that, children's mental health services have been even more the poor relation. And that is true across Greater Manchester, I'm afraid. The children's mental health services are nowhere near good enough, actually. And again, it sounds like we're making all these promises. We have introduced a new mental health policy in Greater Manchester since the mayoral election, and that is prioritising a lot more funding for children and young people's mental health. Now, it won't have all filtered through yet, but improvements are definitely coming because we've all agreed to prioritise it. I think you're right, because you make the point that I made. We've got an obligation to young people in care and leaving care to help them, and I think it is about giving them the support when they need it, such as support with their health. I think also a job and a home, because in a world that's got much more difficult, how on earth does a care leaver kind of make that transition? I agree that people are on the streets for a whole host of reasons, as we heard a moment ago. But I am certain I will meet some care leavers tomorrow morning. I'm absolutely certain about it. And not want to kind of say it's all someone else's fault, but taking housing benefit away from 18 to 21-year-olds was a cruel policy of this government. And it's made our challenge on homelessness a whole lot worse. But there is more we can do, and you work with us through the Youth Combined Authority. And I think, if nothing else, I want to put in place a different and better system of support for care leavers, because actually, when everything else is considered, I think our obligation to you is higher than possibly anything else. We should be your parent and provide that support to help you through those crucial years. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people. I don't mind taking 1 or 2 more, then we'll wrap up. As I realise there are people who want to get in. It's brilliant. I can say again, so many of you came out. It's so good. Go on.
With all the empty buildings in Manchester, we haven't got the emergency shelter for the homeless people, because all the rust leakers are out there now. What about all the empty buildings? Yeah. Especially council-owned ones. They belong to Greater Manchester. Why can't it be used for the people of Greater Manchester?
Okay, well, I'm asking the team to look at that. And we're launching tomorrow, a business homelessness network. So this is being launched tomorrow, where we're going to bring together all the businesses that are prepared to contribute, money or buildings. Because Christopher rightly challenged me. I know we've got to look at if I'm going to meet that goal that I've set, we've got to look at everything. But we've got to learn from experience. Just opening buildings and expecting it all to be, you've got to make sure they're properly secure, they're run properly. So it's not as easy as just opening buildings and letting people in. You've got to make sure, if you are to do it, you're running a proper operation. So
homeless people capable of that, better themselves.
Yeah, of course, there are, and I agree with you. And I'm working with the Skull Fades Foundation. I don't know if you know them. They've got plans to do something exactly in this space. So the frustration is it's not as easy as saying it all can happen straight away, but we are on with it, and I am perfectly prepared to look at that idea seriously.
Okay, one last question.
Okay, yeah.
One of the main things that we haven't been able to get around is the spatial framework. Mine is to do with Denton Green Bank space. We are not on the spatial framework. The Tameside councillors here will know, and I would like you to, if possible, try and get the Tameside councillors to engage with Dane Bank Green Space, because they are trying to sell them to the wonderful developers. We are a very small, our land actually deals with, it has a football club, it has cricket clubs, it has ponds. They wish to sell it, they want to develop houses. It helps, it gets all these young people engaged in doing things. Not going to do that if you're going to put houses on it. However, can I get Tameside Council to actually meet with me? No, I can't, and I have written to them on several occasions. I would like you to try, if you can, to take back Green Space to try and get them to meet with me. Thank you.
Well, obviously that's me. You know, I
Yes,
can't dictate other people's diaries.
It's my only chance to try and
Yeah, well, you've definitely been heard what the point that you've raised. And all I can assure everybody who's worried about the spatial framework, I heard loudly, as I'm sure Will did during the mayoral campaign, that the concern, even the anger that some people felt. We can't promise you that we take all the difficult decisions away. I can't promise you that. It would be wrong of me to do that. What I'm trying to do is refocus it, as I said, on those town centres, focus it more on housing that people can afford. Now, here's a crucial point. I think we had a spatial framework that was just about building more houses, you know, just numbers of houses. The truth is you could do that, you could build X many thousand houses and still not solve the housing crisis. So what we need is a spatial framework and a housing policy that actually solves, or attempts to solve, the housing crisis, i.e. build the right homes in the right places that people can actually afford to live in. That's what we need to do. And so that's what we're on with at the moment. You know, I am asking the team at the Combined Authority to take a proper root and branch look at all of these things. It won't save every bit of land that everybody's passionate about, but at least we'll be able to say, well, we've gone to the places that could take more than that. You know, we've kind of properly gone through it in the right way.
Yeah, all I want them to do is to engage with me, because currently, you know, there's a small group of us, and you've got £9 million from the developers. Well, we're not going to win, are we? We don't stand a chance. But we have 2 schools that are oversubscribed. We can't get a doctor. Our roads are used as a local rat run. What did the council say? The council say, oh no, it's fine, it can go ahead. There are no problems. I'm sorry. Someone needs to listen to us, and nobody is listening. And I just don't know. One of my questions was, how do I get the council and the councillors to actually just take the cotton wool out of the ears and listen to the residents and address what the problems are that we have? The council just doesn't listen.
Like I say, I don't know all the way in which debates have gone at the local level. What I do know is, again, the first draft of the spatial framework, one of its other flaws was it didn't have an infrastructure plan alongside it. So it didn't have, it just had the homes, it didn't have, and here's where the transport goes to support it, here's where the schools go, here's the digital infrastructure that Will was talking about. So here's another commitment. I am looking now at delivering an infrastructure plan alongside the spatial framework. So these 2 things come together as kind of 2 that can be seen alongside each other to try and answer some of these questions.
Right. Our land wasn't on the spatial framework.
Well, I obviously heard what you say. I think I'm probably going to have to leave it there.
Yeah, no, it's not. We've overrun considerably. It is quite clear, Andy, you have your work.
I do, and I know. Well, I asked for this job, and let me just say this very quickly. I'm just sorry to cut you off. I mean, the passion in the room on issues of genuine concern, I think it's great. You know, I think it's really brilliant that so many of you are still sitting here at 9:15 debating issues that concern us all. I think that is fantastic. Absolutely. And you'll have to kind of be the judge of me about whether you think I care enough. All I can tell you is I do. I don't regret for 1 minute leaving Westminster. I think this is where I can make a difference. And I don't want to do it just where I dictate and we do the old politics through this new system. I want to involve you and involve the community. That's why I'm here trying to listen to what you're saying. But you know, if we get it right, if we can, you know, we won't please everybody all the time, but if we can come up with solutions that we've all had an involvement in and an input in, then I think that we've got a chance here of really pushing on and, you know, making this the place that everybody's looking at. Now, I've been in, just very quickly, today we've got a little bit of control now over the DWP budget. It's called the Working Well programme. And people who've been through it now say that on the work programme nationally was like the I, Daniel Blake film, you know, anonymous, targets, form filling, they just got nowhere. And now through the Great Manchester programme, actually somebody listened to them and someone said to them just now, you know, and they're making progress. NHS, you know, rightly I was challenged, what difference are you making on the NHS? Well, here's one thing that we did in January. The government said cancel all elective operations because the winter pressures are so great. Well, actually, we didn't do that here because we thought that was a daft policy. So, in the end, we've been able to reduce the number of cancelled operations in Greater Manchester. Only 14% of operations were cancelled in January, much higher in the rest of the country. I just want you to know that we've got devolution for a reason. We are doing things differently and better, hopefully, because we're listening to you and we're trying to do things that we think you want to see. But I can't do it, you know, I have 9 months in, I can't do it, you know, you've got to give me some time to you know, these are big things that we're trying to do. All I can promise you is I will give it my all, and maybe I won't fulfil every promise, but I'm going to give it my best shot, and we're going to try and do it. And I hope, you know, if we've got as far as we can, that will send a good message, wouldn't it, about Greater Manchester? We're the kind of place that doesn't leave people in the conditions that we described, that does try and put a roof over every head every night of the week, that does try and give hope to young people leaving school, that does look after care leavers differently, that doesn't have a public transport system that's run in the private interest. These are the things we're trying to do. If you give me your kind of patience and a bit of buy-in and a bit of support, get behind what we're trying to do, then we'll all achieve it more quickly. Thanks for coming tonight, everybody.